ready to do our Heritage Studies lesson for the week? All right, so we're going to be on lesson 22, and we're actually in the middle of a chapter, which is okay. I'm kind of zoomed in far. I apologize for that. I may have to fix that in a minute. But I was trying to, maybe if I scoot back, it won't be so bad. You don't have to see me so close up. That's kind of tough. All right, so let's see. The last lesson that we left off on, we had talked about miners and missionaries, gold seekers, people seeking different things. We learned about Tom Smith, and we learned about Wild Bill Hickok and about the cattle drives, the cattle trails, and the cow towns. Remember, we talked about life as a cowboy and life on the frontier and things such as that. So today we're going to be in lesson 22. So if you will turn in your book to page 70, that's where we're going to start today. Now, do you remember who it was that said, "I could walk this country all over for my master if I could only be successful in winning souls to Christ"? Do you remember the guy that said that? His name's kind of hard, but Ezra Fisher. Remember that man that said that? And what did Ezra Fisher do for his master? His master being God. He traveled throughout preaching and teaching and starting churches and things such as that. All right, look at page 70. All right, there's a picture down at the bottom that's pretty neat. It says, the caption there says, a large group of African Americans called exodusters settled in the community of Nicodemus, Kansas. All right, so let's go ahead and start reading on page 70 to find out what farmers used to solve the problem of little rainfall on the plains. So here we go. Remember, you've got to read along with me. I'll read it out loud, but you've got to follow along, okay? All right, Homesteaders, the name of this section. Sodbusters on the plains. All right, the West beckoned more than cowboys and treasure seekers. Many people headed west to set up homes there. In 1862, President Lincoln signed the Homestead Act. This important act opened land in the West to settlers. Each settler could have 160 acres of land. The settler had to build a house, live on the land, and improve the land over the next 5 years. Improving the land meant building a house or growing crops. And after the 5-year period, the land, called a homestead, belonged to him. People who gained land this way were known as homesteaders. Many flocked to the west to claim land on the plains. Among them were freedmen and even some single women and widows. Some of these people owned land for the first time in their entire life. Railroad companies also sold land cheaply along the tracks. Word spread in Europe about the land for sale in America, and immigrants from Europe came to America to buy land in the West. Now, most of the early homesteaders on the plains made their living by farming. Recent inventions like the steel plow and the reaper were a great help to farmers. Prairie farmers grew corn and wheat and raised cattle and hogs. People called the prairie farmers sodbusters. Immigrants from Russia brought an important product to America's Great Plains. The immigrants' turkey red wheat grew well on the prairie, even in the bitterly cold winters. The wheat could be ground into flour for making bread. Wheat became one of the main cash crops on the plains. Farmers grew wheat to sell and sent it by to railroad cities in the east. The Great Plains came to be called America's breadbasket. Even today, if you hear anybody talk about America's breadbasket, they're talking about the middle part of the United States. Homesteaders on the dry, windy plains had to learn new ways of living and working. Because few trees grew on the plains, many didn't use wood to build their houses. They built their homes out of sod. A sod house, or soddy, was made of strips of thick prairie grassland. These sod pieces were fitted tightly together. Some families added doors and put glass panes in the windows. Soddies were comfortable homes. Now and then the roof would leak during heavy rains, or maybe a bit of sod fell out of the walls. But soddies kept settlers warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Very little rain fell on the plains. Many farmers began using the windmill to pump water. Windmills were powered by the strong prairie winds. The windmills drew water up deep from underground. So, what did the farmers have to do? They didn't have a lot of water. They made those windmills. That's why we always see windmills and we think of the open prairies, or at least that's what I think of. All right, there's a picture there on page 71. That's a pioneer family. And there's their sod house right behind them back there. What were some of the disadvantages of living in a sod house? Bugs. It would leak. When it would rain really heavy, it would leak. And a lot of women in those days would put cheesecloth or something up on the ceiling inside so that when it would leak, only water would drip through. You use cheesecloth when you make jelly or jam. And that way you do this and you squeeze it and all the fruit goes into the cheesecloth, and the cheesecloth catches the big pieces of fruit, and then all the juice comes out. So they'd put cheesecloth up, and that way only water would drip through, and they'd just catch it in buckets. And then the sod and the bugs and the pieces of things that would come off the ceiling would be caught in the cheesecloth. Now, some of them may not have had that, but the ones that did would do that. But they always stayed cool in the summer. I wonder why. It was underground, kind of partly underground and partly just made of ground, right? Look at the next page. You ever heard that name of that lady? Can you read her name? Laura Ingalls Wilder. Have you ever heard of Little House or Little House on the Prairie? She was an author and she wrote that book. Now, she lived from 1867 to 1957. And let's read this little section right here, this little card on this page 72 that talks about her. Laura lived in several different places during her childhood. She and her family spent time homesteading in Kansas, Minnesota, and the Dakota Territory. When Laura grew up, she married another homesteader, Almanzo Wilder. Later, she wrote a series of books based on her childhood experiences. Little House on the Prairie is her best-known book. Her work has helped people all over the world understand what life was like for homesteaders on America's frontier. That's pretty good about her. I would say that if you ever come across a book of Little House, they're very interesting. Or you can even watch Little House on the Prairie if you can find it on your Netflix or your Amazon if you have that. All right, let's read the rest here of page 72. You ever heard of barbed wire? You might call it bob wire, but it's really barb wire, B-A-R-B, barb wire. You know, it's wire that's got those little barbs on there. Well, we're fixing to read who invented that and for what reason. One farmer named Joseph Glidden invented a new material for fences. His barbed wire worked well for keeping cattle out of the corn and the wheat fields. It also helped keep Texas longhorns from crossing the settlers' land during cattle drives. Sod busters faced many other challenges. Storms, fires, and swarms of grasshoppers sometimes destroyed their crops and homes. In some parts of the frontier, there were problems between the homesteaders and the Indians. The sod busters could have given up, but most did not. Few settlers had come west expecting an easy life. Those who trusted God took comfort in His control. And still more settlers continued to come. So what kind of houses did they live in? What were they called? Sod homes or sod houses were what they lived in. And who was it that invented barbed wire? Joseph Glidden invented barbed wire. And let's see, why did he invent it? To keep cattle out of their crops, and also to keep those, when they were doing those cattle drives, to keep all those wild longhorns out of their areas and just to skedaddle right on out of here. What were some of the challenges that those sod busters faced? Strong storms and fires, swarms of grasshoppers that would destroy their crops and their homes, and even Indians, and even some other homesteaders. They would have trouble with them too. Now, I cut some rope, little pieces of rope. I cut 2 that were 16 inches long and 2 that were 24 inches long. And I went outside and I put them down on the ground, and I made a video to show you how big those pieces of sod would have been that they would have cut out. But for some reason, I can't get it to upload. So I have a short video that I'm going to play for you that it's a little, talks a little bit about the sod busters and the sod houses. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and play that right quick. And then when it's over, then I'm not going to play it. I'll just put a link on here for you to watch that. And you can watch it when you're finished. That way we can go ahead and do your work text page right now. So if you would take out your page, your work text page 31. And at the top, there's 5 questions. And you have to write true if it's true. If it's false, you have to write the correct word that goes there. That should be the underlined word. And then on 6 through 10, you are going to write the correct word to complete the sentence. Now, the words to choose from, let me see. I thought the words that you could choose from would be on your page, or maybe they were highlighted, but they're not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the words for number 6 through 10, the words for you to choose from to fill in the blanks. I'm going to put them on the screen, but not in the right order. So that way you can have your words to choose from, okay? And I think I'm going to go ahead and grade this page. It should be real simple, a very easy way for you to get a 100, okay? All right, if you have any trouble, let me know. And after you finish this page, make sure you watch that link that I send you. It's only 2 minutes long. It's a pretty neat link, okay? That's all.